So great to see you again, Paul. Is the sound okay? Yeah, it's a bit more.
Is the sound okay? Yes. Sound is okay.
When listening through all your albums, there's one thing a lot of them have in common. I mean, on the first Simon and Garfunkel album, you have a song called Bleecker Street, and there's the cover shoot of you standing on your New York subway platform. And on your latest brilliant album, I think, you sing about walking over Brooklyn Bridge, seeing a billboard of the rapper Jay-Z. It seems there's a lot of New York in your music. What has New York meant to you as a songwriter?
Well, there are two. I think there are several ways I could answer that question, or there are several components to the answer of the question. Put it that way. Of course, I come from New York, so my references to my geographical references are from my hometown. Bleecker Street, for those of you who don't know, it is in Greenwich Village, which was, well, I guess you probably all know, a sort of hub of various art scenes through the decades, and I guess I was talking about the folk scene that went on in the early 60s. That's what Bleecker Street is. And the Jay-Z reference was the bridge that connects Brooklyn to Manhattan, the Brooklyn Bridge. I was taking that bridge every day for 3 weeks when there was a performance of my music at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and I was going there, and there was literally a billboard of Jay-Z, who comes from Brooklyn, and so it found its way into one of my songs. That's really, that's the simple, uninteresting answer.
And I think, I think it's a very interesting answer. There's a special energy in New York as well. It's a city of immigrants. People coming from different cultures bring their own music and rhythms. And in a way, your music is a reflection of that.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because that was the other aspect of the New York influences that actually are more interesting to me, and that is that the music that I first fell in love with when I was 12, 13 years old, that music, that was called DooWop, and that was an urban music that was in a lot of cities, but New York was one of the chief places that this music was performed, and it was basically quartets or maybe quintets, and people would literally stand on street corners under street lamps and make harmony. It was a fantastic time to think about that now. I mean, to think of people standing around on streets and singing together in harmony. But it was actually true in the 50s, and that sound of that harmony and the way those groups were composed, I use that quite a lot in my music. So in that sense, it's also a very New York, a New York influence. There are other rhythmic influences that come from New York too. Latin music, those percussion instruments, congos, bongos, that are common to maracas, that are common to Latin music. I was familiar with them for a long time. My father was a musician, and he was a band leader too. He was a sometimes band leader, but he used to have a yearly gig at Roseland Ballroom, which was a famous ballroom. It still exists, but. And when we were children, my brother and I, my mother would take my brother and me, into Manhattan sometimes to see my father play, and his band would alternate with a Latin band. And of course, when he came off the stage, we could visit with my father. But somewhere in the back of my head, I was hearing this Latin band. So those sounds are also part of a New York landscape. It's a Puerto Rican New York landscape, but it's still New York. And I'm sure I could find other examples of how the city itself has a musical thread that runs through my work, but none is jumping into my mind right at the moment.
Can you tell us a little bit about your family's background? Your mother and father are Hungarian?
No, my father's family came from the Carpathian Mountains. It was, then my parents are born in the United States. My father's family is what was then Austria-Hungary. Now I think it's Hungary. My mother's family is from Latvia, I think. I think they're from Riga.
Mm. And when you met Art Garfunkel in school, he had also sort of the same background, Eastern Europe, Jewish background. Yeah.
Maybe so. I'm not sure if it's Eastern. Probably so. Mm-hmm. Probably so. Maybe German.
Mm-hmm. But that must have been quite old when you started out. As you said, a lot of the DooWop groups you had listening to were mostly sort of black teenagers, and then you came to white kids from Queens. Was that unusual at that time, trying to sing DooWop?
No, it wasn't unusual. The DooWop came from gospel quartets, from the black churches. Those harmonies. It probably came from there, and maybe it was also influenced to a degree in the early stages, which would be the early to mid-50s, maybe by groups like the Ink Spots or the Mills Brothers, a little bit more sophisticated harmony, if I can use that word. I'm not even sure that's appropriate, but so. Those early groups, they came out of what was really called rhythm and blues, and doo-wop comes from just the typical phrase that was just sung, So the first kids to do it were black kids, but then everybody in the city sang it, and everybody sang it. The Italians had their own groups, big hit groups. They were maybe the second group that had a lot of it. Dion and the Belmonts, that kind of thing. But anyway, nobody thought of it. But I don't think particularly in terms of races or ethnic groups. It was the music of the city's streets, and so therefore. We all sang it. Everybody sang it. Yeah.
You sort of developed your own very unique harmonies. I think there's one line on the song "So Long, Frank Lloyd Wright," where you sing that you're harmonizing all night long. Did you literally mean you and Art practicing harmonies all night long?
No, not literally, but we did practice singing. First we sang with 3 other friends, and then we couldn't manage to all get our schedules together and rehearse, so Art and I, began to sing together. And the first groups that we listened to were really rhythm and blues duos, but the main influence on our singing was the Everly Brothers, which of course is very far away from DooWop. It's really coming, the Everly Brothers are really coming from Appalachian music, country music. The Louvin Brothers would be their predecessors. They're coming from another tradition. But Art and I would practice singing their harmonies, and that's how we learned. That's how we learned to sing together. That's how we learned to blend and sing together. It was imitating the Everlys.
Your big breakthrough, both as a duo and for you as a songwriter, was "Sounds of Silence," the song. Can you tell us a little bit about the background about that song?
I wrote it when I was about 21 years old. I thought it was pretty good at the time. And of course I had really no idea that it was more than pretty good. You know, that that it would be sustainable for 50 years, and I had no idea at that age. I've had a few examples of songs that I wrote where they seemed to be unusually inspired. And when I was younger, I was completely unaware of this and just thought, that's better than I usually do. And that's what I thought when I wrote Bridge Over Troubled Water. I said, oh, that's really interesting. I haven't used those chords before, and that's really good. It's better. That's like better than I usually do. Really completely unaware of what a gift it is to get something that you can't explain happen kind of effortlessly and almost pass through you as if you were just a conduit. And later on, I would recognize when this happened that it was something really special.
But also, Sound of Silence is sort of captured and reflected the mood of America and the whole world in a way. It was a year after John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. And the title of the song seemed to capture what a lot of people felt.
Well, as I say, I really was unaware. So yes, I guess it did. And last year when they celebrated, or whatever it is, commemorated the 10th anniversary of 9/11, I sang The Sound of Silence at Ground Zero. And again, it seemed to be appropriate to the moment. I really don't know why. It's something of a mystery, and the mystery of music, or the mystery mystery, is really what is what's, I think, sustains us. We're fascinated. We don't know why. And certainly that's true for artists. You really can't explain everything. Even as you become more sophisticated and really begin to use your editing faculties as a major part of your art, even then you can't explain why something happens that you didn't think of 1 second before. So that mystery, in whatever way you want to think of it in spiritual terms, it's a great feeling. I'm sure that you know what I'm talking about. Most people have had that experience. So, and that's the Sound of Silence. I was such a kid that I quite honestly, I had no idea what I was doing, and I just thought it was nice, and showed it to Artie, and then we figured out a harmony, and
You're very good in your lyrics, keeping everything and not explaining too much. Sometimes you almost work, it feels like a photographer or a filmmaker, starting with setting a scene, so almost choosing a location.
well, I tried to, again, I'll separate. These songs that I wrote when I was in my 20s, which are like Kathy's song, I almost don't, remember, who that writer was. They were very natural. They were whatever was on my mind, and they're sort of straightforward. That period sort of came to its conclusion maybe with the end of Simon and Garfunkel in there, when I began to know more about, yes, for sure it did, when I began to know more about writing songs and how I would, deal with the structure of songs or break the structure of songs. And once that happened, then my way of thinking about songwriting changed. And then it changed again with Graceland, where I began to think, I guess it would be, I could describe it this way. The way I wrote songs up until Graceland is I'd sit with my guitar and I'd improvise something on the guitar, and then I would, react to it vocally and sing and wait till some words came along with the sounds. I always sang in sounds and never in words. I never wrote the lyrics before I wrote the song. And that's the way the songs came about. At a certain point, I said, what I'm doing is I'm reacting to the guitar. The guitar plays this, and that's what I start to react to vocally and with my vocal improvisations. But then I thought, really, I don't have a bad mic? I thought it was kind of interesting. And then I thought, really, why should I be limited to what I can play? In fact, it's not even what I can play. It's what I can play and sing at the same time. So then I started to just make up guitar parts and put them down and then sing over the made-up guitar parts. And then I realized, it really doesn't matter to me where the guitar parts or where the stimuli comes from. So I can go to other places and let them be the stimuli, and I'll be in the editing process sooner. And that's really what happened with Graceland. I went to South Africa. I had a clear intuition that music and the music that I was thinking of, or South African music and American music, were not that far apart, that they could be blended and it would be an interesting blend. That was my feeling when I went there, and it proved to be the case. And basically then I would have more interesting tracks to work on, more different textures that I couldn't create with just me sitting with my guitar. And that produced a more interesting set of songs. And I continued writing in this way, using some outside premise as the beginning of the creative process. The rhythm of the Saints begins with drums. It's just drums. And from the drums, you could usually hear a key, so you knew what key you were in, and then you play till you found the rhythm, or and begin that way. And I continued with that way of thinking until the last album, at which point I said, I've been doing that way of writing long enough, and I should go back to the other way of sitting with the guitar, just because it's uncomfortable to do now, because I lost the habit of it. So the last album, I began with composing guitar pieces and writing songs on top of them. So it doesn't matter to me, really. I can do it either. I can write songs either way. And I can even access those kind of melodies that are like Kathy's song. I know that part of my natural melody. And the same goes with other elements that I've heard. You know, I mean, actually, as I'm thinking, as I'm talking, that my natural melody is probably not a natural melody, but it's just an early memory that I haven't precisely placed. And that's what I fell in love with, you know. And I think we all have that. I think it's a human characteristic. There are certain sounds that everybody loves. Everybody loves a drone. Really, all cultures all over the world, you'll find the drone is there. It's in Indian music. It's in Celtic music. It's just the interval of a fifth. We just all respond to it. We really like it. So I think of that as I'm writing. What are the core things that? It's not that we can't explain them, it's that it's really not necessary to explain certain sounds that you love. And if you keep going back to the things that you love, I think you can more easily renew yourself as a writer, and because that's something that that's an issue that you have to deal with as you get older. Is how do you keep going without repeating yourself? Well, you are repeating yourself. It's that you're just taking the elements and rearranging them. You're changing texture and context, but basically, you know, there's only 12 notes, and that's what you got to work with. And there are, you know, certain harmonies, a combination of notes that produce certain sounds, and some of those sounds you love, and certain sounds you don't particularly like, and that's what makes one's individual music.
If you could make your own sort of like Mount Rushmore of songwriters you admire, which one would you choose from all time?
There's four guys on Mount Rushmore.
I think it's four, right? But you're actually allowed to have 5 or 6 if you want to.
5 or 6 in no particular order, because I don't think there is a ranking. I would say I would probably put Gershwin in there melodically, and maybe Richard Rodgers melodically. I think Hank Williams should be in there. I think, let's see, maybe Bob Marley's in there.
Oh, interesting.
I think out of my generation, a few were exceptional, but the great melody writer out of my generation, I thought, in his youth, was Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
I would say, let's see, who else I could think of that's, I'm sure I'm forgetting, you know, big, big names, really big names of
But-
great songwriters.
But it's interesting that you say like Rodgers and Hart or the Gershwin brothers. Do you think you
Not
also...
the Gershwin brothers.
No, only George.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. But you're part...
Ira was, not great.
No.
Not
But
great.
you're part of like a tradition of popular songwriting that goes further back than the rock music area, really, back 100 years.
I put Chuck Berry in there.
Yeah.
I thought he was a great songwriter. They all come from someplace too. So what are their influences? Where did they draw from? I'm very drawn to African American music, and although I didn't put any a particular songwriter in there then, except for Chuck Berry, maybe Duke Ellington would go into that category. But I think of him more as an orchestrator than a. Anyway, they come from different roots. In American music, anyway, there are two really fertile pieces of farmland where the music comes from, and one is from African Americans, and that would include the church and the rhythms. For me, particularly out of New Orleans, particularly those rhythms that come with the drums up from Brazil and come with the African diaspora up to New Orleans, and the other great area is Appalachian music, country music, and that has its roots in Anglo-Celtic sounds, and the combination of those two is what rock and roll is, and that's American music. Aside from that, I mean, going around the world, there's great songwriters everywhere. I guess I would have to say Joe Beam was absolutely one of the great songwriters. It's so personal. There isn't any way of there's no worldwide Mount Rushmore.
No.
There's each culture has the music and songwriter who speaks to the soul and to the heart of the culture, and that may be translatable across cultures, and maybe it isn't, but I don't particularly listen to the music of Jacques Brel, but Jacques Brel had a really powerful impact on his listeners. He was a really beloved. It's personal.
Yeah. I think we only have time for one last question. Where do you find new music now? Do you still go to record stores, or how do you? Because
there are no record stores.
No. but do you have like a radio stations you follow? It would be interesting just to hear.
Well, I do, but I don't do it, because I'm looking for anything. I'm really not looking for anything. I have enough information now that I don't need any. I don't need to listen to find some new piece of information. I still have questions that I can't really answer that I explore. Like, what is a rhythm that I will really find pleasing? That maybe I haven't done before. And that, again, it's so personal. What rhythm do you like? you find certain people really love a certain rhythm and other people love another rhythm. I mean, you could break up a marriage with a disagreement over rhythm. What? You like that song? Oh, I'll have to be leaving. So that's that's one thing I think about rhythms. I mean, actually, like the last thing that I was taken with rhythmically was flamenco music, particularly the hand clapping and the footwork, and I really found that really captivating. Of course, I've been listening to African music for a long time, and but there's music from everywhere. Northern African music, I find that fascinating. Eastern European, everywhere really, everywhere. There's just music. Music everywhere, and I guess I could keep looking, but I feel like I have enough information now to just try and figure out what I know and what it means, and if it has any enduring value or any value, period.
Yeah. You mentioned Paul McCartney, and he had a great album title a few years ago, Memory Almost Full.
Right.
You don't need any new information, really.
That's right.
Thanks
right.
a lot. Yeah. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
And a big round of applause for Jan Gradvall. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we have some audience questions, and before the audience now they're sharpening their questions. I just wanted to ask a question myself. I mean, you won numerous Grammys, you've filled Central Park, you've been in Africa touring and played for Nelson Mandela and done all these wonderful things in charity as well as an artist. What is your favorite Paul Simon moment from your musical career? Is there something that sticks out more than anything else?
No, I think maybe playing in Central Park. Maybe that.
How does that feel?
Well, I played in Central Park twice. Once with Artie, we played there was about 500,000 people. And then I played by...
500,000 people, that's like almost Sweden.
And then I played there again 10 years later by myself, and there was 750,000 people.
That's almost exactly the size of Stockholm. And
I think it's not the size of the. It's not the size so much. It's that it was, like right across the street from where I lived. That I was in my home city, and of course, people came from all over. So, that would. Yeah, certainly that's one of the things when I think about my career, I think of that. But there were other places that I played that were really remarkable, in terms of memory. But I guess I'd put that on top because it's my hometown.
So, ladies and gentlemen, anybody have a question? Please, Mats, also go to the gentlemen and ladies further back as well, because we don't want to be... Absolutely.
Thank you. I wonder, which are your hopes and dreams for the future?
Well, well, first of all, I hope I have some future, personally. For the future of my children and the planet, I would hope that we could, as a species, reach our potential for enlightenment, for enlightened thinking, which you see everywhere. And of course that coexists with the brutal part of our nature and the the greedy and the selfish part of our nature. So, I mean, if I were not a member of this species, I would not be a big fan of this species. But I am, so I am a member, so I hope that that's where we go, and that we become more like part of the planet and not the rulers of the planet. So that would be a kind of a big hope. I don't know how that would happen.
More questions?
Is this okay? Yeah. A friend of mine, David Howells, if you remember him, has told me some stories about how he came to London in the 60s and were broke, and you stayed in his music publishing office, slept on the floor, he says. Are these stories true? And what did you do in London? This was after Tom and Jerry, I think, and before Simon and Garfunkel. Do you remember David Howells? He's lying.
Yeah, Dave. No, I don't, actually. But I didn't sleep on the floor in anybody's office. When I first came to England, I stayed with a family outside of London, about 50 miles outside of London. And and they sort of took me in like a family member. And then when I started to work and earn enough money, I moved into London. And then I kept moving around. As I kept making more money, I'd say, "Oh, I'd rather go live in this part of town. Oh, I'll get a, you know, an apartment, you know, a flat that has a toilet inside, so I don't have to go out into the hallway where everybody is." So I think, you know, London was one of my favorite times of my life. First time really away from home and living by myself, totally free, and could do whatever I wanted, and that was the first time. And everything about it was so, you know, so new and so much fun, and just playing music and hanging with your friends, no responsibilities. It was great, and that all sort of came to an end with Simon and Garfunkel having a big hit, which at the time I was very, very excited about it. But actually it sort of changed my life, and that was really the end of freedom. Had a few years of freedom, and then after that it was exciting and all that, but it wasn't free anymore. Was that your question? I forgot your question.
No, but it was a great answer.
But it was about a...
More questions?
This is a small and rather personal question, I think, but like most of us here, I've been deeply moved by some of the images in your songs, the Statue of Liberty sailing away to sea, and the Mississippi Delta shining like a steel guitar, and the golden retriever postcard. There's one in particular that I find striking, and you were talking about DooWop before. It's Renee and Georgette Magritte in their Greenwich Village hotel room listening to the Orioles, and I think you say the deep, forbidden music that they'd been longing for. It seems to me such a striking, extraordinary image of the old world, Europe sort of meeting the new world, New York City, and the way that the Magrittes were sort of swayed and energized by that power. It's such an extraordinary image. I'd just like to ask, is it poetic license or is it true?
Oh, it's not true, as far as I know. Here's how that song came about. I was visiting, I can't remember why, but I was visiting Joan Baez in California. And we were talking, and then she had to take a phone call. And so I was looking at books in her, you know, on her bookshelves, and she had a book of Magritte. And there were photographs in there, and one of the photographs said, Georgette and Renee Magritte with their dog during the war. And I thought, because I remembered it as Renee and Georgette Magritte with their dog after the war. And I thought, what a great title for a song. So I began to write a song, but the thing about combining the two, well, that's like what I said before. You don't really know why you do what you do, but once I started to combine the world of DooWop and Magritte, I easily reconciled that as allowable because it's surreal, and that's what Magritte's art is. So I could combine these two worlds that never occurred, as far as I know. I don't even know that Magritte ever visited the U.S. So it's pure fantasy on my part there. And I'm glad you like that song. I like that song too.
So we have time for one last question.
Yeah, I was wondering, maybe I should stand up. I was wondering if you could give me your thoughts and opinions on the technology and what it has done towards the music industry when it comes to good and bad. Bad as being big studios shutting down, internet downloading, and good as in cutting costs when it comes to recordings.
Well, it's a big topic. I use the technology a lot. I use Pro Tools, and Pro Tools, enables you to edit very quickly and very precisely, and that's become so much a part of how I think and construct music that I can't imagine not having it available. But on the other hand, before that, almost all the records that I made, and certainly all the ones that were really popular, they were all made before Pro Tools and that kind and digital. So they were all made with analog, and I think they sounded better. I think that one of the things that the technology has done with the little earphones and tiny little, iPods, and that is that they took away the really great sound. There was a time in the 60s when you could have really high quality speakers, and so the sound was really great, and that meant that people who were capable of producing subtle and even brilliant sounds and playing, that music could be captured and heard on great sound systems with a wide range of frequencies, bass and the pure top end, and that's been compressed a lot by the new technology. Another thing that I think happened, that it's interesting how this goes. Now, with a LP, which is now so gone, except for audiophiles who still go out and purchase vinyl. You used to listen to two sides of a record, and each side was about 22 minutes, something like that. When it got up past 22 minutes, the sound quality was degraded, because as you get closer to the center of a record, the grooves are narrower and the sound quality is degraded. It's better on the outer part. So that meant that you listen to music for 22 minutes, and then if you wanted to, you flip the record over and you listen to another 22 minutes. What I think about that 22 minutes is, it seems to me to be a natural attention span size. and double it is also a natural attention span. So there's a reason why, you know, a class is 50 minutes, or our attention span, it can be divided in certain ways that we can take and we like. When it went from the LP to the CD, the length was no longer 2 22-minute pieces. I mean, you could listen to a really stimulating 22 minutes and then say, let me just stop now and do something else. Or you could turn it over and listen to, you know, do a 44. But when the CD came, the length of a CD expanded to 72 minutes. Now people went 60, 72 minutes. I found I really didn't want to listen for that length of time. And I think, you know, part of what happened and why the LP went away is that people weren't filling up the space in an interesting enough way. So first the technology takes away, but then you put your iPod on shuffle, and that solves the problem again, because now everything's very interesting. You go from you know, Django Reinhardt to Hank Williams to Debussy to Stevie Wonder to whatever. It keeps jumping to what you love. And so you can listen on and on. And that's a good part of technology. As a recording artist, I think I have to make something as interesting as 40 minutes of various artists that are, you know, your favorites, or you're picking 12 songs that you really like. Now, how will I make 12 songs that are going to sustain interest? And it means you have to raise the bar. You have to really think about attention span and interest. And so I think you could take the technology in that sense and say it requires that you be more interesting. It requires that you take into account that people are not going to give you an unlimited amount of time if they're not interested in what you have to say. You know, so there's two different aspects of the technology. Now, I think that the first criticism that I had about the sound quality is easily fixed. Technology can easily bring that sound back in an instant. That's just an economic thing, you know, that they just were uninterested in how this sounded, and they just wanted to see how many songs you could put on. But you can get it back so that the technology will allow you to hear, you know, the beauty of an orchestra or the beauty of a nylon string guitar, and you won't have to have everything be an electronic pulse and drum, which is not in and of itself bad, but too much of it is, for me, I prefer to hear drums, actual drum. I prefer to hear drumming than to hear an electronic drum. So I think we'll come back to the place where the sound gets better. And when the sound gets better, then the musicians will go to a higher level, because you can hear it. If you can't hear it, there's no use to do it. I don't know what's happening here in Sweden, but at home there are a lot of colleges that have good music departments, and a lot of kids study music and want to be musicians. Even though the record industry has imploded, and sales and all that are, you know, are a fraction of what they once were. So many people want to play music, as the 11-year-old who's playing the cello. The need for music is even more now than it was, I think, you know, when I was back in the 60s, when I was in my 20s. So I think the sound will accommodate this, because I think people have a great need for music in their lives almost at all time. So I expect the technology to turn around and give us that, and then hopefully that will entice more people with a higher skill level, and that hopefully will make the mainstream a little bit smarter than what it is. I find it, personally, I find it a little bit stupid, you know, which is, I mean, stupid is all right too, but it's boring. I shouldn't say stupid. I find it boring. And part of that is because there's a lack of great skill. You know, it's about hooks and fashion and other elements that are associated with popular culture, other than what the music was. And I think part of the reason that the few people out of my generation that are still held in high regard, the Beatles and Brian, you know, well, you know who they are, I don't have to tell you, is that there was less emphasis on frivolity or, you know, inconsequential stuff, and more thinking about music. And so those songs and that music has lasted longer than the best of the 90s, let's say, you know, or maybe I could be wrong about that, because I really couldn't tell you much about the 90s. You know? No, anyway, that's a long answer to a short question.
So we are running out of time, and we're very soon go on a break. But first of all, a big round of applause for Paul Simon and for this year's prize winner.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.